Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks again for tuning in on another Tip Tuesday. What I want to talk about today is kind of the setups that I use and how I hook up my soft plastics when I'm fishing in vegetation or around the vegetation. The first kind of setup that I use is just a regular Texas rig. I penetrate the hook, or I'm sorry, penetrate the soft plastic all the way through, and then slightly weed guard the tip of the hook. I usually like to fish this type of rig in very light type of vegetation, to whereas like if I'm fishing it and it's in there, it's not pushing down the worm and exposing that hook and catching any of that vegetation. It's got to be really light vegetation. If it starts to hook my or pull that worm out of that hook and starting getting mangled up on here, you can either put that hook in a little bit deeper, or what I like to do is actually, I have it on this worm right here, penetrate the hook to where it doesn't ever come through the worm, but the hook is actually, if I pull it out here and lay it on the worm, I don't know if you can see that or not, but I would have it inside the worm almost just like how it's laying right now. So I wouldn't put it all the way through like it is right now. Actually, what I try to do is I put it in there to where it's actually in the middle of the worm. So if the vegetation that I'm fishing is knocking that hook off and bringing back a lot of that vegetation, I try to rig it this way. Actually, I put the hook all the way inside the worm, not having any of the hook exposed at all. The only thing is with this really minimizes your hook up to catch ratio. I find out a lot that when I have it rigged this way, when I set the hook, sometimes I'm missing that fish because that hook doesn't come all the way out of that worm. It might come partially out of that worm, because if you can see right here, I'm pushing down and that hook is not even exposed, to whereas if you had it exposed and had it slightly weed guarded, as soon as you push on the plastic, that hook comes popping out. Well, this doesn't pop out here. So the only tip I can give you, if you fish it this way, if you're fishing really heavy cover or fishing that vegetation that is really thick and it's popping that hook out, when you're fishing it this way, you need to fish super heavy line and have one heck of a hook set. Because you really need to penetrate that plastic. I mean, you can see I'm pushing this plastic all the way down and the hook's still not even really exposed. And you got to really give a good pull on it to really get this plastic down to expose this hook. So this is actually one of my last resorts, because it's really rough on your hook up to catch ratio. I mean, you really get bummed out a lot fishing it this way. I try to actually stay away from this. What I do like to do, like I said on this worm right here, is that I will just penetrate that tip of that hook into that worm just a little bit deeper. Even if you go in deep, as soon as you push this, it acts like a trigger and it exposed that hook, and then this will just slide down and you have this much hook right here that penetrates that fish, instead of having it maybe just a small little tip like this, when you have that hook just in the middle of that worm, trying to weed guard it as much as possible. Every once in a while, you'll have inside those pieces of vegetation, you'll have like small little pockets or small little openings, and from time to time, you'll see those fish in those little pockets. And even if they're not in those pockets, you still want to flip your baits in there, because they might be laying on the outside of that vegetation, or actually inside that vegetation, waiting to ambush anything that goes into that opening. The past couple weeks, I've been seeing those openings, and I don't fish any of these Texas rig setups. So what I do is I'll fish the same baits if they're biting these baits, and I'll put it actually on a shaky head, and I will expose that hook all the way. I don't try to keep it weed guarded or anything like that. I keep that hook fully exposed, and when you have this hook fully exposed like this, your hook up to catch ratio is almost 100%, because just think, if they're coming up here to bite or bite that worm that's got that tail up, they're biting that, and that hook is already exposed. So when you set that hook, it doesn't have to go through the worm or go through that soft plastic. it goes right into the fish's mouth, into the lip, or wherever it, it goes into its mouth, and it is gonna, it is gonna hook that fish. I also do that with my crawdads. If I'm fishing that crawdad and they're biting the crawdads, and if you see them on bed or if you see them in those vegetation openings, this is the best way to catch these fish and hook these fish without really losing them, or popping that hook out of their mouth, because that hook is already fully exposed. I do it with salamanders too. I've not too long ago I was catching them on bed on salamanders. This is an 8-inch salamander. I usually like to use smaller salamanders just because if they bite the tail and just want to take that lizard off their bed, they're not going to bite that hook. Whereas if it was a smaller profile, they'll put the whole thing in their mouth because it's so small, and they'll carry it out to deep water or wherever they're wanting taking it, and you set that hook and that hook's already exposed into their mouth. These are a couple of things that I like to do, and I'll also do this on not just a finesse worm. I'll also do it on a Senko or one of those thick yum dingers, and I'll have that hook exposed, especially if I'm throwing in front of the vegetation. If the fish aren't in the vegetation and they're maybe a foot or a couple feet away from the vegetation, just kind of wandering around, I'll have that hook exposed just like this, especially if I know there isn't any cover down there that I'm going to get snagged up on. So having your hook exposed is going to really, really help your hook up the catch ratio. If you're fishing that light vegetation, weed guard it, just just slightly. And if you feel like it's coming off and you're pulling in a lot of vegetation, dig that tip of your hook into that worm just a little bit more. Another thing that happens too, especially when you're fishing these offset wide gap hooks, you have this piece right here, and it has a tendency to grab some of that vegetation, and then you'll have it all around, and then you're trying to pop it and pull it out of that vegetation, and you're actually spooking the fish. So a straight shank hook, just a round bend hook would work pretty good too. And I mean, you can never ever go wrong, especially with a vertical hook set, with or if you're fishing close like you're flipping and pitching with I guess a flipping hook, and when you do have this on, you need to make sure, or have this type of hook, you want to make sure that it has some sort of plastic keeper, so that your hook or your worm isn't, or your plastic isn't sliding down this hook, and this hook catching up all that vegetation. So have that weed guard on here, or I'm sorry, not a weed guard, that plastic keeper, and using this hook right here, because it will take away this piece right here that catches up on all that vegetation. So a flipping hook, I like to fish these wide gap hooks just because I always fish with them. And one quick tip with the wide gap hook, the best hook sets that I have, or the best way of setting a hook with a wide gap hook, is actually with a sweeping motion. From all the experience that I have, when I try to set the hook in a vertical I guess hook set, I had lost several fish, to whereas if I swept which is bringing it from bringing it to the side, my hook up to catch ratio is a lot better. But that's stuff that you guys need to fumble around with, and it might work better for others, and it's just something you need to experience with. So these are some of the things that I do and where I like to fish them. Like I said, these exposed hooks, I mean plastics with the exposed hooks, I fish it in front of vegetation or in those little openings that are within the vegetation, because it just helps out a lot more. And then if I'm fishing light vegetation, I'll have that weed guard, or that hook weed guarded just slightly, and if it starts popping off and catching that vegetation, I'll put it in there just a little bit deeper. The one tip I said about this is that you would have to set the hook like the Incredible Hawk. If you have that hook penetrated in the middle of this worm, to keep it weed guarded as much as possible. You can catch fish on it. I mean, I have done it that way, but I would try to stay away from this right here if you can. If you are doing it too, you might want to try to rig it the other way, to where you're slightly weed guarding it, or weed guarding it just a little bit more. There's some of the tips I have for you guys. Don't forget, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Bassn with Buddy. If you guys have any questions or tips that you want me to share with you guys, just hit me up on Facebook or DM me in not instant messenger, but on my Instagram, and I'd be more than happy to help you guys out. But see you next time.